Coming up on this week's podcast, Red Bull prepare for the start of a new chapter. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris's fight for a maiden F1 title heats up. Ferrari go testing before Spa, and should Mercedes loan Kimi Antonelli? It's time for the latest episode of the Racing News 365 podcast. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Racing News 365 podcast, looking ahead to this weekend's Belgian Grand Prix, the penultimate round before the F1 summer break. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by the awesome duo that is 2023 Young Journalist of the Year, Sam Absolutely Peace Coop, and the man, the myth, the almighty legend, who I've been told does not actually like my intros, but we're going to stick with it anyway. It is, of course,
different next time.
It is, of course. We've got give me until next year. I think it's something. It is, of course, lead editor Ian Parks. Gentlemen, it has been a few weeks since we've done a podcast. Obviously, there's been no race for a couple of weeks. Ian, we obviously had the special episode of Alain McNish very recently as well, so there's been lots going on. First things first, Sam, we've had this kind of pre-summer break, the 2 weeks off, and you've actually been off on holiday. So how are you? Feeling refreshed and very zoned out going into the final two races before the summer break?
I'm saying, look, he's got a tan. Look. You can
I was
see
going to say.
I do actually have
He's
a tan.
looking fresh.
I was heavily criticised by Ian in an earlier meeting today for not having enough of a tan.
It did look pale, that's all. It clearly wasn't showing through, but now you look glowing in this video for some reason. I don't know why.
Too much sun.
But yeah, I'm feeling very refreshed. It's always a good time to get away in between, in a bit of a calendar break, because Ian, you're going away in August. But what it does mean is that you sometimes feel a little bit out of the loop, even though nothing's happened. Well, I say nothing's happened.
Nothing happened while you were away, mate.
It was really quiet. There I am, finishing off my packing, getting ready to go to Gatwick Airport, and just the work chat just pings on. Oh, no, surely not. And on the first day of annual leave, Christian Horner leaves Red Bull. Biggest news of the year. I was just like sitting on the sidelines, watching all my friends have fun. Almost. I don't want to be going on holiday. I want to work today. So obviously,
you should have said. We would have gladly welcomed you with open arms if that was the case.
I mean, in all honesty,
seismic. Really exciting, and has certainly made the last couple of weeks interesting, no doubt.
Yeah. I mean, it's given us plenty to write about, and it feels like all we've written about is Christian Horner. That's across every publication, because it has been, Ian, such a bombshell story that came out just 3 days on from Silverstone. Now we've kind of had a couple of weeks before, obviously, going into Spa this weekend to really digest the fact that, Christian Horner isn't going to be on that Red Bull pit wall. And I'll quickly put this to you, because obviously we spoke in length about Lewis's move from Mercedes to Ferrari and how it would take so long getting used to see him in a red race suit. It's going to take some time, I think, to, get used to seeing Laurent Mekies on the Red Bull pit wall as team principal and Christian not being there.
Well, did you know what? The funny thing is, I actually watched the F1 movie last night. So to give people a time idea, we're recording this early Monday afternoon. So I went to the cinema with my wife and son on Sunday night, and we watched the F1 movie for the first time. And of course, in the F1 movie, you do get to see a couple of clips of Christian Horner. Obviously, yes, there are certain people in there as well that are no longer there, like Gunther Steiner. I'm no longer on the Haas pit wall. But to see Christian there, me automatically thinking, you're not in F1 anymore, mate. I did think that when I saw Christian in the movie. I thought, you're not here. It's really weird. It is going to be quite a surreal experience, I can imagine, as well. Not just for us as media, but for everybody within that Red Bull garage, because Christian Horner was one of the pivotal figures within it and has been for the last 20 years. Never mind the fact that Max Verstappen has been there for a decade, and Marco obviously there for an extraordinary period of time as well. But the fact that Christian Horner had been there since day one of Red Bull's inception back in 2005, and the fact he's no longer there now, I don't recall the fact. I don't think he ever missed a Grand Prix for any particular reason. Maybe there might have been the odd one, but if that's the case, then quite obviously this is going to be the first time he will not be there. So a very surreal experience, as I say, not just for us, but you would assume for everybody within that Red Bull garage this weekend.
Yeah, it was certainly an almighty bombshell to end the first half of the season. 12 races down, 12 to go. Kicking off with this weekend at Spa-Francorchamps for a sprint weekend as well. But we've got to get started, of course, with a bit of a fun question because we have had a lot of pit stops in the first half of the season. So you can maybe see where this question is going. I have not been that sad, but that was actually my idea for the end of the year Big Fat Racing News 365 quiz. No, my question to the pair of you is 3 teams feature in the top 10 fastest pit stops of 2025 so far. Can you name the 3 teams?
Oh, McLaren, Ferrari, and Stake. No,
Wrong.
Wait. It's not McLaren. It's Red Bull.
So what's your final 3 you're saying?
Because Red Bull were quickest. Was it Silverstone? It was recently. So I'm going, so Stake, Ferrari, we know, definitely. I'm going Red Bull was the 3rd.
Ian,
what
are your 3?
Is he wrong?
He is wrong.
Oh, he's still wrong. Okay, so we definitely know Ferrari because I've been tipping them flipping virtually every Grand Prix going.
Yes, it is for Ferrari. In fact, remarkably, Ferrari have the 1st to 4th fastest pit stops on lock and the 6th to 8th. So they actually feature 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They feature 7 times in the top. They feature 7 in the top 8 for the fastest pit stops this season, which is
and the
staggering.
Other one is Stake, isn't it? The other one is Stake, I think.
So it is not Stake. And this is the interesting point that I had a feeling would catch you two out because obviously we do as part of our predictions, which team produces the fastest pit stop from that Grand Prix. Some Grand Prix this season have actually featured pretty slow pit stops. Remarkably, in the top 10 fastest pit stops, there's been some races where Ferrari have claimed it, but other teams have also set very, very quick pit stops. Ferrari, yes, of course, as we've said, have got 7 of the top 8. Red Bull have the 5th and 10th fastest pit stops of the season so far. And Racing Bulls have the 9th fastest pit stop of the season so far. And actually, that's interesting because as we know, Stake have claimed this season the fastest pit stop at a certain Grand Prix this year. But obviously at that Grand Prix, it wasn't within the 10 fastest stops of the season so far. So a very interesting point. Anyways, lots and lots to discuss. I wonder where on earth we should start. We've got to start, of course, with Red Bull's new chapter, brand new leadership, just the 2nd team principal in the outfit's history under Laurent Mekies. It's remarkable that in the space of 2 years, he's gone from leaving Ferrari to taking over Franz Tost as the Racing Bulls, VCAR, or whatever you'd want to call it, team principal there. He's now got this promotion to be the team principal and CEO of Red Bull. Ian, it is very much, as you kind of pointed out a few minutes ago, a fresh start, a new chapter, not only for Laurent, but for the Red Bull organisation, the team in general.
Completely. And I'm going to use Sam's word that we've not used for quite some time. Absolutely, because I just described it. Surreal experience for everybody concerned. It's going to be very unusual for everybody to take orders from Laurent. The good thing about Laurent being there, of course, is that he's not a complete outsider, basically, coming into the fold. He is somebody that people know, people respect. He has at least been there for 18 months within the Red Bull family. He was actually, Christian Horner was one of his appointees, basically, he's played a part in Laurent getting the job, in luring him away from Ferrari, where he had this dual role as racing director and deputy team principal at the time. Highly respected figure, worked with the FIA for a period of time as well, as safety director and deputy race director. So huge experience across the board in a variety of fields. So at least Red Bull has got a very competent individual at the helm that has a good overview on various aspects of the team, both from almost like from a sporting director kind of role, as I say, given his role with the FIA, from a technical leadership perspective, because he is very good technically, but also just from a people management point of view, because the one thing I've experienced with Laurent is he's a very effervescent character. Whenever I've spoken to him, he's always upbeat, always positive. Never seen him really down or give downbeat kind of answers when I've interviewed him one-to-one, and I've been very fortunate to do that on 3 occasions now over these past 18 months since he joined Racing Bulls as they're currently known. So from a general perspective, an overall perspective, he is for a great man to have in charge. And I do think is a really good fit for Red Bull, as is required now, given everything that's gone on previously. It needs a period now of stability because, as we know, ever since the Christian Horner saga unfolded at the start of 2024, no need for me to go into a great deal on that, but ever since that, Red Bull has been kind of like this turbulent kind of ship that's been really needing calm waters through which it can sail again and hopefully rebuild as we go into 2026, because it has been struggling both on and off the track for many reasons. So as I say, hopefully Laurent will not just add all these capabilities that I previously mentioned, but also provide what is quite evidently needed right now, stability.
Sam, with yourself having been off, you've not really had the chance to speak about obviously everything that's gone on at Red Bull over the last couple of weeks. For you, if you had to pick one thing, what do you think is going to be Laurent's biggest challenge as Red Bull's team boss? New word.
Well, the biggest challenge, there's two, so it's really difficult to choose one. The thing that's plagued them the longest and has been a consistent issue for many years is that second driver seat. And I think in many ways, Laurent is almost the perfect person to put in that role, because he's worked with Yuki Tsunoda for years, throughout his tenure at Racing Bulls RB. So he knows him well. We've seen him get the best out of Yuki over the last 18 months, 2 years. And also, if you just look at the way he handled Isaac after the Melbourne incident, and then Liam coming back to the team, he really feels like a warm kind of coaching character who can help a driver kind of recover a bit of lost form and build and develop the tools they need. So I think he is going to be really, really valuable in helping Yuki further kind of unlock what he needs to in the RB21. And in doing so, or in aiding Yuki or whoever that second driver might be long term, I think one thing that he could look to do, and this is a kind of obvious change, is start making that car more benign, more compliant. It's very easy to turn to Max and say, look, you are this good that the car doesn't need to be as tailored to you. I fully believe that Max can get an exceptional amount out of a car that is less suited towards him, less built in his image. So it's whether or not Laurent will want to kind of bring the car back into a more neutral place to make the team more kind of, equal across the two seats. I think that could be a change that he could make. But yeah, I think the second seat is definitely going to be where he makes the biggest impact outside of obviously the immediate concern, which is keeping Max.
Well, the team do have obviously an immediate boost for both Spa and Hungary, and that Helmut Marko has confirmed it will have upgrades for both races. So an immediate boost to at least Max. Obviously, it's not been confirmed yet if that'll be for both cars or just Max. So I imagine we'll find out nearer the time when we get into the Grand Prix, because there has been some races this season where Max has had it first and Yuki's had to wait. So time will tell. Already got in on that front. But obviously, that is an immediate...
Please do the cap. Come on, it's got to be done, mate, at some point.
Thank you. But there's still over 300 points up for grabs from the remaining 12 rounds. Max is, of course, 69 points adrift. Helmut Marko, as you can imagine, is not ruling Max out. Majority of others, though, are. So very quickly to the pair of you. Is Max still in with a chance, or is 69 points adrift too much? Is it just straight up Lando v Oscar? Sam, you can give your view first.
I mean, shall we just take my answer from the last couple of podcasts and just re-clip it back in? Because my stance hasn't really changed. Yes, obviously 69 points is the gap's growing and growing and growing. We're getting close to that point where Max had a similar advantage. I think it was in the 70s. It was about 77 points around this time last year over Lando. And again, at that point, we were saying that it's a huge gap. Is it unassailable? But the McLaren was the dominant car at that point. Yeah, so it's almost a complete reverse of where we were 12 months ago. But as I've always said, you don't count Max out until he's mathematically out of it. It's incredibly slim. It's incredibly unlikely. But never say never with Max Verstappen.
Ian?
The only time I'm probably going to count Max out of it is after these next two Grand Prix, because this is it now. We know the upgrades that are coming on this car, the RB21 in Belgium and Hungary, that'll be it. Because there might be the odd tiny little thing that you might see post summer break, but right now for Red Bull, in terms of getting itself back in the fight, this is it with these upgrades for these two races, because beyond that, as we know, full focus, complete and utter full focus, both financially and technically, has to go on the 2026 car. So if these upgrades don't do anything for Max over these next two Grand Prix, then I think that will be the point we can say, sorry, Max, your title defense is over for this year. Look to 26, and who knows where he might be. I still believe he'll be at Red Bull. I really do. We can cut and paste, as Sam has said, many clips that I've aired over these past few months. I still believe that will be the case. He'll be at Red Bull, but I'm not going to rule him out as we discuss this right here, right now. As I say, give it these two Grand Prix.
Yeah, I mean, we'll mention obviously and discuss Max and whether he will be staying or going in a different angle a little bit later on in the podcast, because an interesting suggestion has been made by a certain Gunther Steiner. But in terms of, is Max still on the title? I agree with you, Ian. I think these next two races will decide whether he is or isn't going to be going into the post-summer break, the final 10 races it would then be. Because actually a very interesting point was raised by Jolyon Palmer, another former F1 driver, is actually Max has had quite a bit of bad luck over recent races. In Barcelona was looking certain for a podium until, of course, Kimi Antonelli had that Mercedes power unit failure, resulting in the safety car. We all know what happened after that in terms of the red mist that Max saw. So Max lost crucial points there, potentially 15 had he finished third. You then look at, obviously, Austria being taken out by Kimi on the first lap at turn 3. Again, Kimi. Well, he's almost, yeah. But again, that's potentially even big points there lost for Max. You then look at Silverstone, where Max had awesome pace in the dry. Red Bull took a gamble on the low downforce setup. In the end, it rained much more than was expected on race day. And in the end, obviously, he was driving, a bus effectively. It looked like how difficult it was to turn that RB21. So Max has definitely been there or thereabouts. If those few incidents hadn't happened, he's only going to be within, 25 points, maybe 30 off the McLaren pair, which is why I think it only takes one bad race for Lando or Oscar and one good race for Max for all of a sudden that picture to look very, very different. And Zach Brown is, in particular, is definitely, every time he's spoken about the title fight, even as recently as last week when he was discussing Christian Horner leaving Red Bull, that, still Zach Brown gets in that we're not counting out Max for the title. Completely different conversation, but he's still getting in that McLaren still see Max as a genuine threat. But speaking of McLaren, let's move on to Lando and Oscar, because obviously it is Lando, and you two may disagree, it feels with all the momentum going into the Belgian Grand Prix and, of course, the sprint weekend, because he's kind of bounced back from crashing into Oscar in Canada, which was the lowest point of his season so far, but he's bounced back in the best way possible, claiming back-to-back wins, seemingly on a real high. And Ian, you can maybe confirm or deny this. It seems, listening to his media and the way he's been conducting himself, that he's being a lot less self-critical, so much more positive about himself. And it feels that, I was speaking to Johnny Herbert, obviously a former F1 driver, last week, and he was pointing out that it seems that Lando is starting to learn how to deal with the mental baggage and is starting to lose that to be able to concentrate more on the track action, taking the fight to Oscar, and that maybe at long last he's starting to get to grips with not being too self-critical. Since Canada, have you seen a different side to Lando?
I've sensed confidence building, that's for sure. We've got used to Lando over time, haven't we? As you've pointed out, being super self-critical, and he makes no bones about it himself. He's fully aware of what he's or has been saying about himself in terms of some of his qualifying performances in particular, some of his race incidents when he's had them, and he's really turned on himself more than, certainly across my time covering Formula One, I can't recall any driver as super critical of themselves as Lando Norris is of himself. But there has been this shift, shall we say, and I've certainly noticed a greater degree of confidence within Lando starting to build. And I do think that has been really required of him, because he was just starting to let Oscar, I think, get under his skin a little bit. Oscar obviously had that good run of results earlier in the season where he won 3 in a row. and you felt that most definitely the momentum was with Oscar. But yes, after what happened in Canada, when it looked like when things could easily have started to crumble all around for Lando, there has been a definite shift in the way he's approached things, and I've seen a definite shift in the way he's gone about things on track as well. A little bit more methodical, I would suggest, rather than being less gung ho. So that's great from our perspective, because now it's closed this championship gap to 8 points when it could so easily have gone the other way and spiraled upward in Oscar's direction after what had happened in Canada. But at least Lando has come out fighting. He's got these 2 wins, the first time he's got back-to-back wins in his Formula One career. And you've got to think that that is really going to help propel him forward. And if he can build on that over these next 2 Grand Prix, and of course, this is going to be a fascinating weekend coming up in Belgium when we've got the sprint as well, and a real tactical twist could unfold there, with something which we'll touch on later in the podcast as well, then who knows? He could go into the summer break with the advantage, with that lead in the championship over Oscar. And that will be quite something for Oscar to deal with, that he would have seen this gap that he had over Lando been whittled away to nothing, and the tables turned.
What's fascinating with it all, and it was something else that Johnny said when I was speaking to him, is that the McLaren drivers have got this pressure cooker they're now involved in, because they're fighting for what would be a maiden driver's title for either Oscar or Lando, which makes it it's an additional pressure in itself that neither driver has the experience of really fighting for an F1 title before. Lando, in the end, didn't really get anywhere close last season, despite having some momentum behind him. But Sam, what's fascinating is we've reached a point where Oscar's not won in 3 races. Obviously, as we saw, really frustrated with the penalty he got in Silverstone. The pressure is only going to increase, isn't it, now, as we get closer and closer to the end of the season for both drivers?
It will, and this is the intriguing element. This is what will cause that momentum to continue swinging back and forth between them, is exactly as you say. They have no prior experience. They're walking of this environment. They're walking into uncharted territory for themselves, and the benefit for them is that they're in the same position, both where they are in their careers, but also within the team. And of any team on the grid, you look at McLaren as the one who are going to be as equal and as fair as they can be towards both those guys. So that's going to be a certain amount of solace to both of them, is that they know they're fighting on a completely even keel. And I think that's partly what makes it so intriguing for us, is same cars, same complete environment. It is driver versus driver. Who can cope the best? Who can deal with that pressure as it continues to ramp up? Who's going to minimize mistakes? Who's not going to let the other one get under their skin? And that is ultimately what will decide this championship. And again, with the regulations overhaul looming, there is that additional ingredient of, this could be my one chance. I might be a one-time champion because of circumstance, and this is it. And we could look back in 10, 15 years' time and go, well, yeah, Oscar won the title there. That was Lando's only chance, and Lando never wins a title. So that will increase the pressure even more. It could be the only year that Max has an off year car-wise for the foreseeable. And let's face it, those guys are still not near to Max at Max's absolute best. If you're looking at sustaining a championship charge in near enough equivalent machinery, you've still, I think, everyone 99 times out of 100 goes, yeah, Max is going to win that title fight. So it's really, really tense. And I think this is what makes this year so intriguing. It might not blow up between them, but we're still going to be tuned into it, because it might. And even if it doesn't, it's still going to be really, really interesting.
A team that obviously, I guess it's tense for a very different reason, is Ferrari, it was looking so good for them going into the race of the British Grand Prix. Lewis in particular showed really good pace, probably the best pace he's shown in red so far. Of course, the rain, a bit like for Max in the RB21, the rain for both Charles and Lewis made the SF25 just impossible to drive. Lewis kind of called it one of the worst cars he's ever driven in the wet, which is a pretty damning statement from the 7-time world champion. However, Ferrari has been busy ahead of the Belgian Grand Prix. They conducted 2 film endings at Mugello, obviously a one-time host of the Italian Grand Prix. And what's interesting is that the new rear suspension they tested seems to have been pretty positive. It looks like they will be introducing it in Belgium. From the sounds of it, it looks like it does lose them some top speed, but much more confidence through the corners. Ian, Ferrari are one team, and Lewis in particular, who could really do with just one big result going into the summer break.
Again, absolutely. Let's use that word. Why not? We got two. Well, I'm taking over the absolutely's from Sam. This is meant to be his word, remember, of course.
Ian absolutely parks.
Definitely not. You are correct, of course. They're just almost like Red Bull. Almost. I almost did a third time, but I held back. Just like Red Bull, that needs to do something over these next two Grand Prix with the updates that it's bringing to its car. So Ferrari fundamentally needs to do exactly the same because, yes, it has struggled. Lewis Hamilton has not finished on the podium at the end of a Grand Prix weekend. Yes, he won the sprint race in China, as we know, and we thought, wait, here we go. Lewis is here. Everything's going to be great. No, it's not been great. It's been absolutely not terrible, but not great from his perspective. He knows he's struggled for various reasons. He's still trying to adapt into the new team. He's still getting to learn ways of working with his race engineer, Riccardo Adami, the various aspects of the car, with the way Ferrari goes about doing certain things he's never experienced in his entire career before, not just at Mercedes, where he's obviously won 6 of his 7 world titles, but previously with McLaren, where he won his first. So it's all new, and Lewis is still fundamentally getting used to it. But the bottom line, of course, is the performance of the car. That has been lacking for Lewis. And if that rear suspension has something about it that will provide Lewis, in particular, as we know, who likes a very specific kind of car into and out of corner entry, if that can do anything for him, then we're going to see it around these next two Grand Prix, and in particular, the Hungaroring, especially bearing in mind the twists and turns of that circuit, and where we know Lewis has a phenomenal record, 7-time winner at that racetrack. That's one of his favourites. So if there's anything about this car, it's got to come good for these two Grand Prix weekends, not just for Lewis, of course, but also for Charles. He's not won a Grand Prix yet this season. Been on the podium 4 times, I believe it is, so not too bad. But yes, Ferrari, we were expecting great things of them this season, bearing in mind how close they pushed McLaren at the end of last. It's just not happened. So again, like Red Bull, these next two Grand Prix are now or never in terms of where the rest of this season is going.
Well, of course, Lewis's last win was obviously Spa last year. Obviously, gained the win after George Russell, who had won the race, was disqualified for his car being underweight. So Lewis has, a perfect recent track record at Spa. But I want to move on to Mercedes because for me, they are the most confusing team to kind of make a prediction of going into this weekend because you look at going into Silverstone, we all thought cool conditions. Mercedes were awesome there last year. They'll have a great weekend. They really struggled in Silverstone this year. Last year in Spa, okay, yes, take away George's disqualification. It was a 1-2 on track. Looked really, really strong. Awesome performance. Does that mean they'll be strong this weekend? Does that mean it'll be the complete opposite? And like in Silverstone, somewhere they were good last year, they'll have a bad weekend. A bit of confusion. It's funny though, isn't it, Sam? Because again, going into Silverstone, a lot of people, not just us, thought, keep an eye on Mercedes, cool conditions. We know their car goes well there. Watch out. You would imagine the same would be said going into this weekend, but because of Silverstone, it's kind of difficult to make that prediction at the moment.
It's very difficult to make that prediction, and it's the W16, like the predecessors, is proving to be quite fickle and much more weather dependent than some of the competitors it's racing against, and that is what makes it so difficult for Mercedes, let alone us, to predict how their car is going to perform on any given weekend.
Predictions coming soon.
Well, exactly. It's for them, it's it depends if the weather holds up. If it doesn't, well, actually, if you keep it cool, like you don't want really good weather, but also clearly they don't particularly like rain or difficult conditions that we saw in Silverstone. So that it's a really narrow window, this sweet spot of kind of cool, dry conditions that they need. And with F1 being a sun-chasing championship, obviously Belgium, isn't, we're not talking the Middle East or, Northern Africa, but it gets pretty hot in, around late July and August. So they could well struggle if that temperature is up there. And again, we've had adverse weather in Spa many times before, so they will be a large part looking at the weather and how that will do. So yeah, it's almost impossible to predict because, as you say, Silverstone last year they were really strong and actually in changeable conditions. So again, it's anyone's guess almost. But yeah, the thing with Mercedes, every time they think they've turned a corner and they've learned something, within 2 or 3 races time, it almost feels like it's back to square one and they haven't learned anything at all. You get the sense that they're kind of just waiting for the end of this ground effects era now, just to be like, just ride this 4 years off. It didn't go to plan. For whatever reason, they couldn't get the most out of the complicated floor and how the ground effects works. Move on, look towards next year. And you can see that in the kind of posturing for drivers, all this movement going on behind the scenes. That is a team very much with both eyes towards 2026.
In addition, though, obviously to Spa being a sprint weekend, there's also an additional factor, Ian, that all the teams have got to take into account because of what the tyres Pirelli are taking to Spa, something very unusual from the Italian tyre manufacturer.
Yeah, they've done something not done for 3.5 years since the 2022 Australian Grand Prix. And that is they are doing a step in their compounds. So what that means is ordinarily you have the hard, medium, soft, as everybody knows. And normally, as we've seen for the past 3.5 years, those compound categories run back to back. So let's say, for argument's sake, C2, the C3 and the C4. This time around at Spa-Francorchamps, and bearing in mind, all teams only have one practice session to get used to their tyre allocations, is that we have C1 the hard, there is then a gap, and we're going to have C3 medium, C4 soft. So that really will shake things up in terms of not only just preparation for the teams, as I say, bearing in mind it's only the one practice before we go into sprint qualifying on Friday afternoon, but also race preparation and in terms of strategy as well. So pretty much it's now really pushing the teams into a 2-stop strategy, unless there's any kind of capricious, unless the capricious nature of the Ardennes strikes again and we do get any kind of wet weather across the course of the weekend, then if it's a dry race, then you are pretty much going to see a 2-stop strategy. Last year, there were 5 drivers that tried a 1-stop. And for George Russell, it did actually work until he was, of course, disqualified. Unfortunately for poor old George, due to his car being below the minimum weight requirements. So, and Lewis Hamilton inherited that victory. So, yes, a lot for the teams to take into consideration, given that step gap in the compounds, and bearing in mind they've only got one practice session, not the 3, as is ordinarily the case, because it is a sprint weekend, the 3rd of the 6 that we've got this season.
Which does likely mean, because Pirelli are doing something different, that we'll probably get an entire wet weekend, knowing the way F1 seems to work at the moment. Who knows? Hopefully we don't get a wet weekend if we can actually see this different strategy from Pirelli have an effect on the race, because I think that could be very interesting. Final talking point before we do our predictions for the Belgian Grand Prix, and it is a suggestion that was raised by former Haas team principal Gunther Steiner surrounding Max Verstappen and whether he does or doesn't go to Mercedes. But in particular, who should make way for Max at Mercedes if he does join? The kind of general belief has been that if Max were to join, George would likely be the one who gets asked to politely leave, given that he's kind of the senior driver. The amount of money they've put into Kimi, it'd be a bit of a waste to get rid of him so early in his career. However, Gunther's raised a suggestion, which actually we ran a poll at Racing News 365, and 51%, so quite narrow, but 51% do agree with him, is that Mercedes should consider loaning Kimi to a midfield team for next season. He suggested the likes of Alpine or Williams, but let's just say a midfield team in general, to allow Max to come into the team to partner George, given that Mercedes look like they should have a very strong car for 2026, given all their history with designing F1 engines when engine regulations have changed. I think it's quite an interesting idea, because actually Kimi, when you look at his results, has struggled more perhaps than we've realised. Particularly, I think it's something like he's only finished in the points once in the last 6 races, and that was his podium in Canada. I think it's like 4 retirements in the last 6. So it has been a really difficult period for Kimi, who maybe is feeling the pressure of being in the factory team. Sam, what do you think? Should Mercedes just trust Kimi, field him alongside, whether it be George or Max or whoever it is in the factory team, or should it actually do what Gunther says and send him on loan?
Well, this is the tricky thing, isn't it? And Mercedes knew that there were going to be these troughs as well as these peaks to Kimi's rookie season. So it won't be alarm bells within Mercedes. It won't be hugely unexpected that he's had a run of poor results. Many rookies have fared far worse than Kimi has. But I think what's difficult is because you look at what they could do lineup-wise, and Max and George is, without doubt, the strongest possible lineup potentially open to them for 2026. I don't think anyone's saying that Kimi is close to George or will be on George's level by next year. But what damage would moving Kimi out on loan do to that relationship? A lot depends on actually the characteristic of Kimi and the people around him as to how they preserve that relationship and how Mercedes and Toto is able to say, look, this is for development purposes. We actually think this will be beneficial for you in the long run, so on and so forth. Because I can't imagine, go 10 years back, say Max is put into that Mercedes, say alongside Nico or Lewis, and after a year they go, actually, we're going to move you out to Williams or whoever. I can't imagine the Verstappen camp being like, yeah, cool, no worries, all good. I think it would have severed that relationship. I think it would have been really detrimental to it. And it's whether or not they feel they can make that move without it having long-term repercussions and ramifications for Kimi at Mercedes. I don't think Toto takes that risk if he feels there is the potential for damage down the line, because Kimi is he's the heir apparent to Lewis's throne in many ways, which is harsh on George, but that is the sense that we're getting from the team, especially with these talks around Max. If they feel that they can find a home, say Alpine, utilising a new relationship there to good effect, then I can't see why you wouldn't potentially pursue that avenue just to see how it happens. Give yourself the time to put Max and George alongside each other. But I can't get past the point that Ian has made countless times, and I think we've all made it at this point. I just don't see what the benefit for Max is in moving before he knows the lay of the land next year. Now that Red Bull have made moves potentially to try and keep him or appease him by removing Christian Horner, he might say, you know what, I am going to hold fire. It does change the equation with Mercedes. So yeah, it's a very complex picture, but I think Mercedes have to really weigh up what damage it could do to their relationship with Kimi Antonelli.
So just finally, so if you had to give an answer, do they loan him or do they not?
I don't think they do.
No.
Okay, no. Ian?
No. Thrice no. There we go.
Nothing to add. Okay, right. In which case,
then let's somebody up perfectly. So
yeah, brilliant. Very, very well.
Yeah.
We'll definitely clip that for a short. Right, very quickly, let's end on our Belgian Grand Prix predictions. And we have representing the fans, Boris from the Netherlands, who has predicted that Lando Norris will claim pole. The top three will be Piastri third, Verstappen second, Norris for the win. 10th will be Nico Hülkenberg. Fastest lap will be George Russell, and Ferrari will claim the fastest pit stop. I'm going to go next because I don't think I've gone first this season. I'm going to say Max on pole. The sprint weekend, I think, is going to work really well in their favour. It's a track Max likes. With the upgrades, at least he'll get the sprint quali in the sprint race to dial it into the right window before, obviously, the second Parc Fermé closes. So I'm going to go Max pole, Max win with Oscar second, Lando third. We will go for Carlos Sainz in 10th, fastest lap Piastri, fastest pit stop Ferrari. Sam?
I'm going to go Oscar pole. I'm going to go Lando win, Oscar second, Max third. And then we're going to go for fastest pit stop. I'm going Ferrari. For fastest lap, Carlos Sainz. Carlos is speaking to me today. Let's go Carlos. And then
Wow,
Well, I mean,
that's a bold prediction. It's why you're bottom of the table, but it's if you want to go out there, mate.
Yeah, but you've got to roll the dice when you're in this position.
True, this is true.
So let's go Carlos. Why not? Although I'm feeling really unsure about it now. Thanks for that, Ian.
No, you made your bed, lie in it. There we go.
And then no surprises for guessing who I think is going to finish 10th. Yuki Tsunoda.
Ian, or should I say championship leader, bring us home.
Bring you home. Okay, so I think Lando's going to continue his streak. I really do. As we discussed earlier in the podcast, I think confidence is building. Confidence is definitely on the rise. So I'm going to go triple crown for Lando. Pole, race win, fastest lap. Just think he's doing it. I'm gonna go Max second and Oscar third, which is slightly different to you two guys. I think just slightly, because I think Sam, you went Oscar win, and
no, I went Lando win, Oscar.
You went Lando win, Oscar second. Yeah. So at least I've got Max second and Oscar third. Fastest lap, look, it's quite clearly, as we discussed earlier in this podcast, it's been Ferrari doing it with 8 of the top 10 so far, best times. So yeah, they're going to continue to smash it. And what does that leave? That just leaves 10th position. So we've had Yuki, we've had Nico. Nick, what did you go for?
I went for Carlos.
No,
I went for Sainz. Sam went for Yuki.
I went Sainz.
I went fastest lap, didn't it? That was it. So we've had, there we go. So we've had
Carlos and Yuki.
Nico. So I'm going to go, who should I go for? I'm going to go for, let's go for something a little bit different, 10th position, Alex Albon.
Interesting. And that brings an end to this week's episode of the Racing News 365 podcast. For those watching on YouTube, let us know your predictions in the comment section below and anything you are thinking about going into the weekend. From myself, Ian, and Sam, we will see you this weekend for the Belgian Grand Prix. See you later.
Take care as always, folks. Thanks for watching and listening.
Thanks for joining us.